spending time looking at the sponge. Yep.
So the water's still going to come out, it's just got to saturate your property first.
Exactly. So the water is going to be still running out of the sponge because we've still got that thing called gravity, haven't we? So the water is still running out of the sponge, except if you just poured the jug onto the sink, how quickly did the water run off? Pour it into the sponge first, the water runs off slowly. Yeah? So that's what you're aiming to try and do. You're trying to get your landscape to be a sponge. So in this shot here, it's just talking about, I think at the time I had about 400 head of cattle in this, steers in this mob. They were in a small area. They were there on a half-day move. They grazed for the first couple of hours. Once they were full, then they started playing around in the water. Now, there's no harm done there, but it just gives you an indicator that when the animals are not grazing, that's when they'll start playing around in the areas that may be sensitive. Now, is that a problem? Generally, most of the time, not. But if that was a flow line and you had a big flood come through there the day after, it may well be a problem. Yep. So understanding that some areas are sensitive and we determine the times at which we might use impact on those areas. Same deal, this is a creek. You can see that it's a sand bed, so highly mobile material. There's reeds in there. The reeds are filtering the water and managing erosion. The cattle have come in, grazed the reeds. Once again, not a problem unless we get a flood the day after we did it. So all we need to do is think about, okay, what would be the best time to graze those areas and over what length of time? This stuff is very easy to achieve. You can manage it. You just have to give it some thought. So filtration. So where do we filter? Our wetlands, our steps in the landscape. For anybody who hasn't been around this stuff before, you probably don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about a step. But when you go out into your landscape, let's say you look at a ridge, and you know your ridge generally slopes down at whatever angle. When you look carefully, you'll look at your ridge where it slopes steeper, then it slightly flattens, then it goes steeper again, and it slightly flattens. Where it slightly flattens, they're the things that we call steps. Now, where you've probably seen it more is in a creek. If you were in a creek or a river or a gully system, you can see where water ponds, and then where water runs, and then where it ponds. Has everybody seen that? Have you been out and looked at a creek and you've seen that happening? So you ask yourself, why is the water ponding? The water is ponding because there's a step creating the pond. And then the water flows over the step down into the next pond. And what it's doing is it's gradually moving its way down the slope. Yep. So our broader landscape is the same. So our steps are areas where the water naturally once slowed. The contours are something we put in place to do that, to filter. Your floodplains were big filtration areas once upon a time. Melon holes, swampy meadows and billabongs. All of those areas are filtering areas. Now, a lot of these places, like your floodplain, it would be a good filter, except most of the time you're probably using it for something, whether it be grazing or cropping or whatever. So there may be periods of time where you don't have enough plant material there to filter. So what else could you do? Filter the water before it gets to the floodplain. Yep. So why are wetlands so important? Because they're crucial to filtering the water, nutrients and matter in our landscape. Because you want to try and keep that on your place. Even if you do nothing else with it once you've caught it, at least you've captured it at that point and it can gradually make its way down the slope over the next period of time. They're key locations where recharge of your landscape occurs. So our big old wetlands that used to be on our floodplain systems when they function were areas where your floodplain recharged the aquifers. Today, most of our aquifers don't recharge anymore, unless you have a long, extended wet period. When I travel around all over the country, all I see is massive potential, because what I can see is what that landscape used to be like. The potential for holding water in this landscape is immense. You look at the depth of some of our floodplain areas and the soils in there. Once upon a time, they would have had high water tables. They would have held gigalitres and gigalitres and gigalitres of water, which today runs down the gully, out to the ocean, and takes possibly your soil and at the very least your fertility with it. So we need to get these things functioning again for your productivity. So this is on PA's place, that's his little contour that he put in place, and he converted to being a wetland all by itself. All he did was add water, and the system built by itself. So these are natural filters. You guys would have these. You probably call them bulrushes. You'd see those in your creeks. Sometimes you get them in the dam. What do you do when they get in the dam? Dig the bastards out, don't you? Don't want them in there. Guarantee you remove those, the water goes cloudy. Once you get those plants in there, they will filter the water and clean it up. I saw a thing the other day, and there was an area, I don't think it was in Australia, and it had water hyacinths. Have you heard of that plant? I'm sure the FBA guys would know about water hyacinths. They probably won't like me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Water hyacinths turns up when there's too many nutrients in our water. And so rather than understanding that plant is turned up and telling us about the condition of our landscape, what we tend to do is to kill it, poison it, because it's a weed. Where in actual fact it's a resource, because that plant is filtering water, the nutrients in the water. If we harvest the plant, we could take it up somewhere else and turn it into fertiliser to grow our next round of plants. Yeah? So these plants are merely, again, they're just indicators of the condition of our landscape. And so we don't blame the plant in that case, we look at the landscape that feeds that water system. Because it's the landscape that feeds the water system that's feeding the nutrients in there, which is the problem. Deal with that, solve the problem. Really, really simple stuff. So return to the top to recycle the lot. So we want to create feedback loops. If we can maintain the fertility on our landscape for as long as possible, we get to grow more plants. Yep. Again, very simple stuff. What about when you get an animal mite? Does anyone have any animals that die on their place? Yeah, only one person. Geez, you rest of you guys are bloody good farmers. I tell you what, our chickens die all the time, the damn things. I'm not sure what we're doing wrong. You guys, nothing. Only one person here has a dead animal. Or there's one honest person in the room. And this is the point, that when an animal dies, things happen. An animal dies. Now, if you happen to think, oh, that's a bad thing, and you move it, where do you take it to? Pig trap? Okay, so it's going to be another resource to do something else, to catch some pigs. Where else would you take it?
Top of the hill.
Top of the hill. Would you really do that? You do? Bullshit we do. There you go, see? Bullshit we do. Where do you take it to? See, most people, particularly if you've got others around, you take it to somewhere where no one else can see it. And where would that be? The eroded gully. Get rid of that bloody thing, hide it in the gully. Then no one knows that our animal died, because they never lose any animals, do they? So they're not going to criticise you. So we take it to the gully. What is that animal? That animal is potential fertility. Where did we put it? The lowest part of our landscape. See, these are the crazy things we do. If you were to happen to feed your animals, not that I would be recommending you go hand feeding your animals, but if you may have done it in the past before you changed your mind on that. Where do you tend to feed them? You feed them in the lowest part of the landscape, because that's where the gate is, that's the easiest place to get into. And so now you've added all this extra fertility in there, you've accumulated the animals to that point, and then when it rains, where does all that fertility go? Into the gully where the dead cow was, and then washes away. If we just think about this stuff, we can use our day-to-day actions to help build our landscape, just by thinking about it, understanding that water is moving everything around and it moves it from a high point to a low point. So you could use your livestock like we talked about before, so grazing them in lower areas and camping them at the top. You can make hay or mulch if you're into machinery, and you could be moving it up there. Or you could be feeding stocks at the higher part of your place, or feeding lick, or having water or shade, something that will attract the animals up to there. It doesn't necessarily have to be just your animals that you're farming either. It could be the bird life. It could be the wildlife. Any of those things are going to move fertility around. So you think about fertility moving around your place. What's one thing on your place that you probably don't particularly like and don't appreciate what it might do? And it's an animal, and it's a native animal, and I'm sure you would never kill it. But they might move around your place. Pigs, wallabies, kangaroos, they're pains in the arse, aren't they? You don't want them. But I want you to think about, what do they do? Can anybody think about what they do? They dig up. Yep, the pigs might dig up. What else do they do? Do they poop? Yeah. So do they move fertility around your landscape? Yep, they do. Where do they generally die? Whether it be on their own, or maybe they had a helping hand to do it. If they had a helping hand, then it's falling on the helping hand to decide where they died. But if they were to die by themselves, where would they die?
Die in the gully next to the cow.
Is that because you poisoned the cow? Generally, they die on the same landscape they're living in, which means everything they took was returned back to the same piece of landscape. So we're not actually losing anything, but obviously we lose production because they're competing for feed that our animals would be eating. But at the end of the day, we produce something that we send somewhere else and never get it back. Those animals are utilising what's there and transferring it back to the same point. Just another way of thinking about it. Not that I'm encouraging you to keep all these, because these animals are now unmanaged because of the systems that we create. We have more food, more water available, so we end up with more of these animals. So there needs to be a management tool. But what I want you to think about is that they play a role in moving stuff around your landscape as well. So there is a benefit. It's just a slight upside that you can see. Yep? And if by some chance they happen to meet their demise, you could always put them on what part of the landscape? Top. Yep? So you add your fertility, so you're moving fertility around. So this was our place at Bylong, where I grew up and where PA started doing all these work. You can see a contour system there, and on the bottom side of that, I would move hay up there and drop that through the haymaking season, and the bales would just sit there, and when cattle went through on part of that rotation, they might eat some of that, otherwise the rest of it is breaking down and feeding that system. Now, when I was about 14, I would operate this machine which made an 8-tonne bale called a stack and mover. And PA would have me out there driving around with this bloody machine, picking up all of this hay, making these 8-tonne bales and carting them up to the top of the hill. Now, it just so happened that I just loved to drive a tractor. I had no clue as to why I was carting this shit up to the top of the hill. But that's what he had me doing, carting this stuff up to the top of the hill. And see, this is part of your learning, isn't it? When your grumpy old man is just telling you to do something, you're not really interested in why you're doing it. It's just if you enjoy doing it, or that's what you just have to do because you're told to do it, you do it. But years later, you could still see the result of that material being dropped there. 20 years later, it was still growing more plants where that material had been dropped than anywhere else. We talk about if you're able to do something like this, if you were to put a tonne of material up high in your landscape, does anyone know how much water you can hold with that 1 tonne? 5 times. So 5 times the weight of the organic matter it will hold in water. So if that's a tonne of material, that's 5 tonne of water you can hold at the top of the hill. That's 5 tonnes of water that isn't coming barrelling down to the bottom of the hill. So you think about how that compounds. So you could do that, forget about hay, you could do that in biomass. So if you're able to grow huge amounts of biomass, then it's going to do the same thing. Get that biomass onto the ground, it will do the same thing. Your soil, the same. Once you get your soil working like a sponge, it will hold all of this volume of water up high, which then leaks out slowly down below. So how many people here operate a garden? It's probably going to be the ladies of the house because the blokes are too busy running around killing shit. So the ladies have got a garden. What do you do to grow a really good veggie garden? You mulch it, don't you? Compost, yep. Did you ever tell your husbands that that's how you grow really good plants? Yeah, because that's exactly how you can do the same thing out on your landscape. You just replicate what you do in the garden. But we tend not to think about it, do we? We just go out and we do our same old stuff we've always done, without understanding the first lesson you have is what you're doing in and around that house yard. So the greenery.
When you went out and dumped the bales under great stuffers,
Yes.
did you put them in the waterways or you just dumped them?
No, never in a flow path, always on the high ground. Because where is the water going to always end up? In the waterway, in the flow path at some stage. So let's not speed that up, let's take longer to do it. So we always put it on a ridge. So it will eventually it's going to make its way to the flow path anyway, but as it moves its way down, you've got an opportunity now to grow more plants as that nutrient passes through, or the water. So this is an example of what we do on the farm at Gympie. So we'll mulch, like I talked about, along our contours, and we compost. So our chickens, when they retire to the retirement home, they just suddenly turn into compost. And so when they suddenly turn into compost, we go, whoop, geez, I don't know how that happened. They turn into compost, and then we put the compost along the bottom of the contour. And so then over time, because the contour is managing the faster moving water, if there is any, the slow moving water moves the nutrients that are gradually breaking down over time out of the compost. Now, what can you see we've done with the compost which would be probably different to other areas where you've seen people utilise compost? What's the difference? It's mounted, isn't it? How would we normally put compost out? With a spreader, wouldn't we? Go and chuck it around, burn a bit more diesel. Where we've put it in a windrow. Why do you think we've done that?